Happy Wicked release day to celebrate. I've been listening to the new movie soundtrack and, of course, the original Broadway cast album to celebrate. Today, though, we are heading over to a very different Emerald City. No, I can't just bring us over to Oz, but I can lead us to Seattle, a city that has also been deemed the Emerald City. I'm sure you all have heard the report that came out about the Seattle storm being investigated. And if you haven't, we'll catch you up, along with tracing through exactly how the organization got here. So I have Emily Adler here with me this morning to help make sense of it all. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, it starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fellow Aussians. No, I'm just kidding. And hopefully this will be my last Wicked reference, although it probably won't. I'm Jackie Powell. Welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball, and happy Friday. I'm one of the hosts of this program. I cover the New York Liberty at the Next, and I have covered this sport nationally at many other places. Thank you for making our show, Locked On Women's Basketball, your first listen every day. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at the Next. So that includes me and Emily, a place where we cover the game all the time and tell the stories that need to be told every day. Subscribe now to support our staff at the Next. That works really hard. It's $9 a month or $72 per year. Find us at thenexthoops.com and subscribe. Also, this show is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Also, your favorite podcast is now a newsletter, including the Locked On Daily newsletter, a one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. So today, our show is brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. But anyway, moving on to what we are going to discuss today. I have brought on someone who actually used to cover the Seattle Storm really closely, and maybe still sort of does. So Emily, remind me exactly your timeline when it comes to covering the Storm.
But basically, almost immediately after I joined the Next, I ended up on the Storm beat. So this is maybe a couple weeks into the 2021 season. I covered regularly as a beat writer for 2.5 years. I've still been on and off in terms of just tuning in pressers. I was in Seattle for a week this past summer. So I'd say, yeah, that's about the realm of experience.
And yes, you were there right when Noelle Quinn was hired and Dan Hughes retired. So where we're going to begin is in segment 1. We're going to talk about the news. We're going to talk about what we know about this investigation and the reporting from the one and only Annie Costabile. Then in segment 2, we're going to go back on a bit of a time warp. And that's in part why Emily's expertise is really important and really useful here. We're going to talk about the different off-season moves, in-season roster decisions that the Seattle Storm have made from 2021 through 2023. And then in segment 3, we're going to look at their 2024 season moves in hindsight. And we're going to look at sort of how that has affected the place that they're in right now. And overall, we're really looking at how their decisions have gotten them here, which is, an interesting and to some unfortunate place. So that is what our show is going to be. So according to Annie's reporting, it says a law firm hired by the team, the Seattle Storm, is looking into accusations of alleged harassment and bullying by the coaching staff tied to on-court performance during the 2024 season. The allegations stem from incidents that happened at practice and during games, and an email from the law firm, which was obtained by the Chicago Sun-Times, showed that the investigation has been active for at least 2 weeks. So this reporting came out on November 15th, so less than a week ago, or around a week ago. So about now, this investigation has been going on for 3 weeks. So I think part of why we aren't surprised about this, and this is what I think you were alluding to before, is how the season ended for the Storm. I guess, can you sort of take through some of the tensions we saw in that first round playoff series against the Las Vegas Aces?
It was a very close series. Were they good, but not, legitimately great team. But part of the issue was, and this has been the issue with the Storm all season long, it got a little bit smoother at times in the season, but it never improved, which was really for them, the ability to generate offense in the half court was horrendous. And that is, when we talk about generating offense in the half court, we're talking about creating sets. We're talking about following, the usual rules and flow of an offense. We're talking about how skill sets are integrated together to really create, what you think of as like the slow game of basketball. The Storm were especially slow for various personnel-related reasons. But the big issue is, at least to start the season, same as it was last year. For them, really, the break glass in case of emergency, hey, there's 4 seconds left in the shot clock, someone needs to shoot this shit, that was Jewell Loyd. And that has been since Stewie left. Jewell Loyd, at the time Stewie left, was, a roll 7. She was an all WNBA player, multi-time. She's, excellent, borderline elite two-way 2 guard. And it made sense to sort of put her in that position, especially given her production from, say, about 2019 through 2022. The issue there is she basically responded by having what I can only describe as like a Betty Lennox season in 2023. She led league in scoring, but that came at the cost of very mediocre efficiency. This season, things basically were about the same. The efficiency got a bit worse. And that just didn't improve at all throughout the season. Part of it was, this very difficult shot diet. And part of it was just things that used to work for her, a level of separation she used to be able to create, just aren't happening in the same way that they used to.
And I don't know if all of that is to put blame on Jewell Loyd, which we'll discuss in the next segments. It's about the team that's around her. It's about the coach that's around her. And so that is what we're going to dive into in segment 2. We're going to look at some of those changes, some of those roster changes. Mm-hmm. We're going to look at 2020. The Storm won 2 titles in the span of 3 years. How did they go from that to where they are now? That's what we'll be discussing in these next 2 segments.
Right, and the thing about, I'll just say really quickly, the thing about, like I was saying with Jewell Loyd being like that break glass in case emergency player, is the way that their lineups and roster were constructed was A, leaning very heavily into defense, and B, offensively leaning heavily into shot creation, but not especially efficient shot creation. So you need someone to take that final shot with the hope that you get to a decent shot beforehand. Horson's a good cutter. Nneka's a great sort of like catch and shoot, like 2-dribble player. Diggins-Smith is obviously great, but not the most consistent point guard. And so that's where you get Jewell sort of having to take on a role that at this point in her career might not be suited, but was, let's say, 4 years ago.
And, you need a front office to be able to realize some of those things. And you need a coaching staff to make decisions based on what they're seeing. right?
Which we will talk about in segment 2
and 3. So, I want to first talk about our good friends at Chime. Chime is a place that's helping people with financial progress. So join millions of Chime members who are working on their financial progress. Chime helps you make progress with fee-free overdraft up to $200. Your next deposit is applied to your balance, gets spotted on debit card purchases, and cash withdrawals. No monthly fees or maintenance fees. Over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. To date, Chime has spotted members over $30 billion. Make sure your finances are a little greener by working toward your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bank Corp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. Thank you, Chime. Now I'd like to hop over and talk about our good friends at Game Time. I'm going to see Audra McDonald in Gypsy. These are the previews. It is not officially official, but I used Game Time to make sure that I could go to see Gypsy. So Game Time has curated deals that make it easier to find the best and great seats. You can find the super deal, and you can also see seat views before you buy. So lowest price guarantee, even cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Game Time makes curation easy, and you can save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. There's all-in pricing. It shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get your seat view. And so this app is pretty good when it comes to getting discount tickets last minute or maybe not so last minute. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Or it's also showtime too, but anyway. Let us get back to our program. Thank you, Chime. Thank you, Game Time. I'm back here with Emily Adler, where we have been discussing what has been going on with the Seattle Storm. And I think it's really important to talk about the decisions that have led us to this point where the Storm are being investigated. So, Emily, I think it's worth reminding listeners who the Storm were in 2020 and sort of what ended up happening for a few years after that 2020 season.
Right. So the 2020 Storm lineup, which was the same as the 2018. Was it the same as 2018? Yeah, it was the same as the 2018 Storm lineup. It wasn't, I think. Yeah, it was simply the best lineup in league history, aside from Comets and Lynx dynasties. It was the best, not everyone in this lineup is going to the Hall of Fame team of all time, I think is the easy way to put it out. You've got Sue Bird, Jewell Loyd, Alysha Clark, Breanna Stewart, and Natasha Howard. Natasha Howard, I think, is the easiest way to start here because she's the first domino. So the lineup is obviously elite. They work together in a number of ways. We're also dealing with players who at certain points in their career were either eager to be role players or sort of knew what they were doing at that spot. You know, your number one scoring option was Breanna Stewart, who should have won MVP in 2020 and won MVP in 2018. You have your number two option is Jewell Loyd, who was becoming an all-W player, who I basically through like the middle of 2021, from like 19 to middle of 21, was probably the most underrated player in the league at that point. That was the number 2 scoring option. Sue Bird, since the second ACL tear in, I think, 2013, it's basically, sort of an off-ball point guard for whatever that means. And that gels really well with the usage you want to give those other 2 players. Alysha Clark, purely 3-and-D, pure spot-up 3. Don't even have to worry about it. And Natasha Howard sort of fit in the in-between, just doing everything you want a big to do that doesn't incur heavy usage, and that fits in between. And for Natasha Howard, that was really that fit well for where she was in her career. Natasha Howard's always been a tweener as a big. She's too much of a center for a 4, and she's too short of a center for a 5. But playing next to Stewie, who is so good as a weak side helper, and they're both such incredibly long players. I think they both have +8 wingspans or something in that range. It works together. Natasha Howard is so good in Seattle. She sort of out of nowhere has this absurd 2019 season when Stewie was out, and that really informs the decision after the wobble, after that title. Natasha Howard's a free agent, and she wants to be able to take on more, and she wants to be able to sort of prove her star somewhere, which she can't do next to Stewie for the reasons I basically just mentioned, the same reasons why she was so good in Seattle. So basically, she requests a trade. She gets signed in trade with New York. That returns the number 1 overall pick in the worst draft since 2007, 2005? Yeah, 2005. And so because that number 1 overall pick is not worth a lot, it gets basically almost immediately traded for Peter Lou Samuelson out of Dallas. Yep. The other move from the other 2 moves from that offseason worth noting. Alysha Clark leaves in free agency as well. She goes to Washington. And the other one is Simi Whitcomb. Simi Whitcomb was leaving in free agency pretty flat out. They were able to get New York to do a sign-in trade for her, which was at the time a pretty savvy move for Seattle. And in the process, they pick up Steph Talbot's rights.
The reason why I believe this is important is because you had a championship winning roster that, 2 of its starters left. Mm-hmm. And so Seattle was a team that wanted to continue to contend because Sue Bird, Stewie, and Jewell Loyd were all there. And so how do we think they did at trying to replace those role players that were very important? I mean, Simi Whitcomb was not a starter, but she had a role that she played very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the specific issue you run into here, right? Alysha Clark for 3 or 4 years was simply the best role player in league history. And I say that it's a very defined role. And it's specifically because she was a role 6 defender, but decently switchable. But also she was a pure 50% 3-point shooter, which is absolutely insane. She also got fed a very steady diet of wide open 3s because of how the rest of it worked. She ended up being one of the best bench role players in the league for the 2 years that she was in Seattle. The Storm, at this point, this is the first time that you start running into the issues, which I talked about in the first segment, which is where you have the offensive problems. You have you have issues at the end of shot clocks creating shots in the half court. And that's sort of something that you live with when you have Breanna Stewart after the Achilles tear, because the athleticism isn't there as much, but she's still very good. Sue Bird is never creating her own shot. She never did that since middle school. And Jewell Loyd, again, was always coming off of actions and screens she was great. Creating her own shot was a tough proposition. And so with all these things combined, you don't exactly have the same margin of error you had when everyone in the starting lineup was basically an all-star. So you have this parallel thing of, again, trying to develop Jordin Canada. Mercedes Russell breaks out. Ezzie Magmagor in 2021, that's her first season in the league. She looks very promising. So you have this weighing of win now and at least have some talent stuff for the future against Steph Talbot's in that way as well. 2021 ends with Stewie spraining her other Achilles, which no long-term effects, but it does mean that she happens right at the end of the season and she misses the playoffs. They lose in overtime to Phoenix in the first round. Phoenix ends up going to the finals, and it's pretty safe to say that Seattle would have won that game if if Stewie was available.
And so what is the one decision in 2022?
Was that the core?
Yes. Let's talk about the core.
Yeah, so Breanna Stewart and Jewell Loyd are both unrestricted free agents. Jewell Loyd, by all accounts, if Seattle is going to give her the money, she is not going anywhere. Breanna Stewart, as you reported, meets with Seattle, and she meets with the Size, who at this point own the Liberty. We know in hindsight sort of what happens there, but a lot of this is, as you noted at the time, part of this meeting was essentially saying like, hey, if/when you leave Seattle, this is what's going to happen next year when you sign with us. And here's what our infrastructure is going to be. Here's what we're doing with this franchise. And Stewie's like, hell yeah. That is not to say that she necessarily, like, in her mind for the next calendar year is 100% going to New York. And we'll get to that in a second. But that sets up her going back to Seattle, and basically in the vacuum, you would core her because she's got to stay because she's the best player in the world at this point. And she will be for another basically years now. And Jewell Loyd is great, but she's a supermax worthy player, but she's not Breanna Stewart. Breanna Stewart basically says, you can't you can't core me. Does she have the leverage for that is something that we can argue about.
Can I just clarify something? Did she actually say that? I mean,
it has been told to me through different channels that that's basically what she said. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to listen to her. Because what's she going to do? She could request a trade, but that's really not going to happen. That's almost certainly not going to happen.
I mean, well, here's the deal, Em. Because so she wasn't cored, and if she wanted to request a trade, then Seattle could have gotten value. As we will move through to 2023, why don't we just move through to there?
Well, I mean, the thing is, she was never going to leave Seattle that year because Sue Bird was still there.
Yes.
As I wrote at the time, basically the reason at that time you core Jewell is you think there's a bigger chance of her leaving than Stewie. And I think that could have been a fair assessment at the time, given Stewie was basically always going to stay for Sue. But it does have downstream effects, as you mentioned.
Yes. I mean, because what ended up happening was when Stewie left, the Storm got nothing for her leaving.
Exactly. And they end up having an absolutely excellent 2022. And because of a couple crazy shots and Chelsea Gray simply having the greatest postseason by any basketball player of any gender in basically league history, they lose in, I think it was 4 games to the eventual champion Aces. And again, this is a season where they don't make it to the finals, but you can very easily say this is a lineup that maybe you could argue it could have / should have been a title favorite at that point, but certainly was a very legitimate title contender. They succeeded in building that.
Oh, I thought that the Storm were getting to the finals that year. Mm-hmm. I really did. I thought, what a great send-off for Sue Bird. And then it ended short.
Sue retires after 22, and that basically means that, okay, Stewie might not come back because, the main tether that she had to definitely continue to come back to Seattle isn't there anymore. But it's fair to say that I think despite the sort of like handshake agreement that she had with the Size the year before, there was a legitimate chance of her going back to Seattle. They were in strong contention for a while. And, there are a lot of mechanisms that have downstream effects to what we're talking about today with the coaching, with the management and the roster and all that. The very short-term effect is basically they hang on so long to needing to see if Stewie commits to Seattle. But the issue is there's about a 2-week period where players negotiate before they can officially sign. Stewie signs basically on the first day, but she doesn't commit during the negotiating period, which most high-end players do. And so that's why Steph Talbot leaves. Steph Talbot leaves because Steph Talbot, we know, would have stayed to play with Stewie, but wasn't going to sort of hang around while a very good offer from LA might have disappeared in the meanwhile.
Correct. And there has been some reporting out there where there was not a contingency plan for if Stewie did not decide. And that is something or Stewie did not decide to return, that's an important thing to have. It's important for a front office to lay out many different situations, even if the player who you think is coming is not. And so you also saw this when the Seattle Storm were very interested in trying to sign Courtney Vandersloot. And they sort of planned that she was going to replace Sue Bird, but when that didn't happen, they were scrambling around. And then, well, look what happened. Jordin Canada left.
I'm not sure that's as fair with Sloot. With Stewie, there was no. With Stewie, there was definitely no contingency plan, which is kind of funny in hindsight based on the way the roster turned out. It looked like they were intentionally being like, okay, Jewell Loyd can't be most people would have agreed. Jewell Loyd couldn't be the number one player on a title team. And it's really hard to bring in players who can be the number one on a title team. So it was, okay, we have some elite player. They're like absolutely elite talents at the top of the draft the next like 2 to 3 years. We're going to do like a quick tank, pick up, I don't know, tightening Aaliyah Boston or Caitlin Clark or whoever, and like go off and like, if that maybe Paige or Cameron Brink, possibly go off from there. And
but they
have
didn't.
that sort of like very quick retool. That's what it looked like. It wasn't. Like you're saying, that was actually completely unintentional. As far as the Sloot thing, they knew it was going to be close, like a 50-50 proposition.
But you got to plan for it, and they didn't.
Yes. And the Jordin Canada thing, they never offered her a restricted qualifying offer. So they never really intended to match or to keep her even at like a league minimum.
So all I'm trying to say for the listeners is that we're talking about all of these players that were leaving. So many players left this franchise in maybe 3 to 4 years or 2 to 3 years in this between 2 and 4 year span.
And part of that was intentional and anticipated, and they had sort of backup plans in place, basically like an almost military defense in depth strategy. But yeah,
not really. I mean,
but then you hit the 2023 portion, and that's when there's not a backup here.
There you go.
Yeah.
And they signed Kia Nurse to a 2-year deal. Jewell Loyd was extended. They also
re-signed Sammy Whitcomb.
Yes. And
both of those deals, especially given the size, were basically scrambles to fill out the roster.
Exactly. And so now in segment 3, we're going to talk about what happened in 2024 and how that impacted what we see now, and how what we just discussed very much so impacted 2024 as well, and how there were some miscommunication issues. You said what you said about Jewell Loyd maybe not being the first option on a championship contending team. But was she told that? We don't know. So we will be back shortly. But first, I do want to tell y'all all about our friends at Robinhood, and they are the sponsor for this very episode. So Robinhood, they are, with Robinhood, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with the handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Thank you, Robinhood. And now we are back. I'm here with the wonderful Emily Adler, where we are really trying to examine how the Seattle Storm's history has led them to this point where they're being investigated. So where we were in the timeline was, okay, Breanna Stewart leaves and they do not have a great season in 2023, right?
That is an understatement. They not only not have a great season, but they go from sort of having an inside track to getting the number 1 or number 2 odds, let's say, for Caitlin Clark? Yeah, Caitlin Clark, to making a push, like 500 push over the last month of the season that takes them to, I think, it was the worst odds, or maybe it was the number 3. Mm-hmm. Basically, they had a very sort of 2024 Washington Mystics approach to the season, which was lose early, get your fans' hopes up that they can have Caitlin Clark, or in Mystics' case would have been Paige Beckers, and then for some reason play too well at the end of the season for that to work out. And so what you have is the lottery. They end up with the number 4 overall pick. So you don't have much worth with that. So in some ways that once they were stuck without the contingency plan, they pivoted well enough. So you end up with a bad season that we knew was going to be bad. We thought it was on purpose. Turns out it wasn't on purpose. And then you come into this past offseason in which they pivot pretty well.
We know they signed Skylar Diggins-Smith and Nneka Ogwumike.
Yep.
But in order to do that, they had to get rid of their lottery pick.
Mm-hmm. Which was essentially, they would have been in position basically to add
Rickea Jackson,
which would have been a nice addition to the roster.
Very nice addition.
But they don't, what I'll say is they don't have to get rid of the number 4 overall pick to sign them. What they have to do is they have to get rid of Kia Nurse's contract to sign them. And Kia Nurse's contract, as I pointed out from basically the day it was signed, was immediately one of the worst contracts in the league. Kia Nurse, even aside from like a week and a half in the 2021 playoffs, she's been an inconsistent player at best. She's not someone you throw that level of money at unless, again, you really need shots to fill out your roster, and you have to talk yourself into the remaining free agents a month into the free agency period. That's how you end up with that essentially dead money on the roster. And again, these are like solid pivots for where they're at. For a lot of these moves, especially 2023, winter 2023 and winter 2024, these are a lot of moves that are good in a vacuum. They make sense, like packaging a deal for a prospect who is good but not great to get rid of the money so that you can sign Nneka and Skylar Diggins-Smith. That's a good move in a vacuum. But it's a move that you had to make because you set yourself up to do that, to have to do that in the first place with the short-term planning from beforehand. Correct. They, at least as a franchise, are still in a great place institutionally. You know, they have an excellent dedicated practice facility that was open. A bit that I always did on the beat was especially an exit interviews, asking players who are on their first year on the team how it compared to their previous experience with the franchises around the league, and I always praised the professionalism and the ability to focus on basketball while they were there. You have these factors working in their favor, even as the margins keep getting slimmer.
And so that, what you described, and I love that you described this, that dynamic was how they were able to land Skylar Diggins-Smith and Nneka Ogwumike.
Exactly.
Also, part of it was that they had the space for their talent. Nneka Ogwumike was thinking about coming to the New York Liberty, but she did not want a bench role. She wanted to be a starter. She wanted to be competitive. She wanted to really play. And so that was part of bringing those two talents in. You use this phrase in a vacuum, and I think that applies to basketball-wise, how those skills were going to work. Seattle was scrambling. They wanted to be back to winning, especially since they did not land a franchise talent in Caitlin Clark or Cameron Brink. And so they decided to leverage their institutional advantages to get stars, and they wanted to put themselves back into the upper echelon of the league. That's what they wanted to do. It was very clear.
Either go for Skylar and Nneka, or you try to blow it up, and you try to be like, hey, maybe we can suck enough for Paige Beckers, maybe we can suck enough for Juju Watkins.
Yeah, so exactly. The Storm were at a very difficult place because of previous decisions that they made. So how does all of this factor into the investigation? Well, so you have now many more stars, but do their play styles mesh? We learned not really.
And it is worth noting especially that, there are ways to make it work on the court. It certainly worked defensively. Storm consistently one of the most impressive defensive teams, especially as you watch the way they make communication rotations. But it's worth noting, off the court, Nneka is known as a very strong locker room personality. Skylar Diggins-Smith, mostly through the fault of her employers, has been run out of town in 2 different places. And again, in both of those places, she was probably in the right. However, she is known around the league as an extreme hard ass. When it comes to practice, when it comes to her teammates, she basically expects 110% every day in, day out, which is not the worst thing as a sort of leader veteran, but she's a real hard ass about getting it. And that rubs some players the wrong way.
Absolutely. And so I think, but the thing is, when you have a bunch of personalities in a locker room,
Exactly.
You need a head coach who knows how to coach different personalities and knows how to psychologically get people to buy in and be on the same page. And so Noelle Quinn, she was thrown into an interesting situation where she was taking this team from Dan Hughes. Dan Hughes had Sue Bird, who essentially, and Noelle Quinn had Sue Bird, right?
Mm-hmm.
She
was a second coach.
She was a second head coach. And so when you take Sue Bird away, someone who was very good at getting her teammates to buy in, you're sort of setting someone up to struggle. And I believe that is sort of what has happened and what has led to this investigation, this rift between the stars on this team.
This is a tough situation. These are a number of personalities in the locker room who are hard to manage together. For really any coach, these are Nneka and Sky have gone through a number of head coaches in their career. Again, sometimes they were in the right, sometimes they help contribute to that. It is a reportable thing that I can say. Jewell, coming into this year and even to some extent 2023, was someone who's extremely understated. Like famously in press conferences, she's not going to give you much in the answer unless you're like really specific about the basketball question. And she never had to be a leader as long as Sue and Stewie were on the team, and she was perfectly happy not having to be. She sort of had to step into that over the past year and a half or so, and she did. In 2023, she did quite well in that role in terms of, helping lead new players who were new to the team, helping sort of set examples there. She had that ability, and then you change that in 2024 and you ask her to kind of go back a little bit.
That is a fabulous point, which is it's the communication. You ask Jewell Loyd one thing in 2023, and I just wonder, was it communicated well enough that she needed to take a step back? That is just, and on the court it showed. And so I think we have done a very good job in this period of time of laying out the reasons why the Storm are in the situation that they're in.
Uh-huh.
I really do. And in the show notes, I'm going to include some of the reporting that others have done about this situation. But I think just looking at the players that have left and how the Storm have looked to replace those players and some not so smart decisions or would have landed them here. So thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. Our favorite podcast now has a newsletter, introducing Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter, your one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered to your inbox. I want to give a huge thank you to Emily Adler. This has been Jackie Powell and...
Oh, me, Emily Adler.
And we are signing off. Enjoy your wicked weekend, everyone.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.